This is Andrew for CollectionDX.com taking a look at the Transformers ES Gokin Rodimus Prime, or Rodimus Convoy. Both names are on the package, so that's kind of neat. Nice international appeal there. So if you're not familiar with ES Gokin, they are all SD die-cast action figures, and Rodimus here certainly has a bit of heft to him. He's like 4 ounces. I actually weighed him on my little scale. His die-cast bits are mostly concentrated in his torso here. His legs, both his thighs, shins, and feels like even his feet are die-cast metal. And I believe there's also some in his upper arms right here around like the wheel section, but can't really tell. So he's got a nice look to him. Styling-wise, he's somewhere in between the cartoon, representing that with a little SCF figure, and the toy, or I should say the Studio Ox version. As you can see, he's kind of got the yellow on his waist, which comes from the yellow on the toy, and his spoiler is definitely a bit more toy or Studio Ox style with the shape of it. But, he's got his wheels on the back of his arm, so that's pretty cartoon-like. And, yeah, Rodimus fanboy here. But anyway, size-wise, he's only about 4.5 inches tall. I'll just bring out my awesome ruler here to show you that. So again, not very big, but he's got that kind of good feel to him due to all the die cast. Another little size comparison, just real quick. Here he is next to the current Combiner Wars Rodimus figure. So again, not huge, but still feels pretty substantial. And actually, I made a spoiler for this figure on Shapeways. So anyway, and one more size comparison before we dive into this toy itself. Here it is next to a standard Nendoroid. So you can see that's how we're doing with SD figures here. So Rodimus is a fully functional SD action figure, and he's got some neat details to him. Starting off with his head, it's on a ball joint, so we can look all around as far as the shape of his face and stuff will allow. And if I zoom in real quick, I just want to show you his eyes actually have some mechanical detailing underneath. There's some clear blue plastic with painted silver inner optics, which is it's neat. It looks kind of weird sometimes because actually it's fairly visible in like natural light, so you might not be used to seeing your classic G1 Transformers with almost like movie style eyes to them. But anyway, the chest flame, this is actually sculpted into him, and it's outlined as it should be. And even the Autobot symbol is sculpted on there and painted, so it gives it kind of a nice feel to it. It really pops off of his chest. You can see that it is actually, again, just a little bit, just coming off of his chest, just a little bit. And he's got, fake wheels on the back. Of course, this doesn't transform, but, it still has the details of his transformation. And other than that, he's just kind of nice, chunky little guy. So, just going to get into focusing on his articulation. His arms are on kind of a double ball joint, so you can kind of move them just pretty much all the way around. And if you find that the top part of his shoulders is banging into stuff, they added this joint where you can just move it out of the way, and you get a better look at the inner details of how this figure works. So this is kind of useful, obviously, for allowing him to not constantly scrape this against the painted spoiler. Although it is kind of weird if you leave it like this when you're posing him, because it's, you're getting the tire actually goes underneath this part of his shoulder. But anyway, and if you're actually using this joint and you find that this thing is like moving out of position, because this is actually kind of a separate sleeve that moves around this joint up here, you just have to adjust it back into place, just kind of push on it. He has bicep swivels, he's got single jointed elbow, and he has a ball jointed wrist, which facilitates the hand swapping gimmick. Now his waist, it's fully movable, but it's kind of tight, and I'm going to be moving it just like this, just kind of like walking it over each way. This is just because I don't want to break it. You know, I don't know what it's actually made of, the ball joint stock itself, but you know, better safe than sorry. You can definitely go like all the way around though. Just be careful when moving it at first if it's tight on your figure. So I'm going to talk about his waist for a sec. This is kind of weird. So the actual waist panels here, the waist armor, this is a flexible PVC plastic. And the reason is so just so it can kind of move out of the way as you're bending his hips around, because his hip is on a ball joint, and it can basically move wherever you want it to. My only problem with it is that it feels kind of weird when you're mashing this die-cast bit against this PVC bit, because you know it can kind of get caught as you're moving it. Like on this side, it tends to get caught a bit more where you're really mashing it in there, so you kind of have to like pull it and then make it go underneath the skirt. And it feels like you probably shouldn't leave it in that position, like on your shelf too long. Just like pose it, then put it back. But anyway, that's kind of my only big issue with this toy, is just the flexible skirt. He has single jointed knees that move a little bit more than 90 degrees. And he has, well, he's also got this upper leg swivel right here. And he also has double ball joints in his ankles, so you can kind of move them in and out all the way like this. They'll rotate like that. And in here there's a little plastic ring that has piston detailing on it, so it actually sort of floats as you're moving the ankle around. You got to give him more mechanical joints with his detailing. But yeah, anyway, that's Rodimus' Articulation. He's pretty nice hand candy, I definitely got to say. Rodimus is a pretty straightforward ES Gokin as far as gimmicks go. You basically just get a big set of hands. These are for holding accessories. These are open hands and then pointing fingers. And this is a nice little holder thing that actually has enough space so you could leave him handless. But the way these swap out is you just pop them off the ball joint, and it seems like some of the paint comes off from the inside every time you do it, but don't worry about that too much. It definitely doesn't affect the look of the robot. You're just kind of seeing some of the orange plastic that's inside his forearm right there. So I'm going to give him a holding things hand and an open hand. And the holding thing hand can be used with his rifle, the Photon Eliminator. And this is a nice, just sort of SD version of his weapon from the G1 series and the original toy. And I appreciate that it's just this, because it seems like there are more modern Rodimus toys that try to do some weird gimmick with his gun than just, you know, giving him a functional weapon. But anyway, he has no problem holding it, and if you don't worry too much about his flexible skirts, you can get him into some nice dynamic poses. So, and he will hold a pose pretty well. You just got to make sure that he doesn't tip backwards, because he's a little top heavy. But in addition to that, you can also give him some pointing fingers. And that's important because you got to recreate that scene from him in the movie where he's like, "This is the end of the road, Galvatron." And also, it's kind of a law that all figures of, or I should say, Japanese figures of Autobot leaders or Cybertron overcommanders, they always have to come with a pointing hand. Because it's just very, you know, commanding. He's like pointing and being like, "Hey, get the Dinobots out of the river!" But anyway. What you can also do with the holding things hands is Rodimus comes with the Autobot Matrix of Leadership. And let me just pull this one off here. So with the Matrix of Leadership, the way you get him to hold it is you just pull out the bottom part here. See it right there. and then just sort of jigger his hands in a way that he can actually get them close enough to hold it. The box shows it going like this, and you just sort of have to be aware of the position of the open part of the hand and the exhaust pipes on his arms. So just sort of wiggle it around and just slot it through. There's enough give in there that you don't have to be precise, and then you just arrange this the proper way and it'll nicely slot back in there. And now he's holding the matrix and he can be like, Optimus! Anyway, it feels a little fragile, the matrix, so I would kind of pose him first and then put the matrix in his hands. Because you don't want to like break these little things. It's not like super delicate, but it's just that it's a plastic thing with a kind of tight jointed die-cast figure. So leave that out until you've got his hands in the proper position. And the last bit of stuff that ES Gokin Rodimus comes with is all this junk, which is actually what makes up his display stand. And this thing is actually its own building toy in and of itself. You get these big panels here, and they can be fit together in different ways. You can do it like this, or you can do it like this, right, like that. And this is more for connecting several of these together. But the main way you want to do it is just like this, and this will slot together. You get move that out of the way, you get 4 of these things, and you're going to notice that a tab is missing from one because I accidentally broke it off. When these things tab into all the various slots all over this base thing here, they can be kind of tight, so be careful how you pull them out again. But the whole idea with these is you can just set them up like, they have actually multiple slots in them, so you can set it up like this. You get a pair of left ones and right ones. Just watch the bottom light right there. You can set them up like that. You can just kind of use one of these. Yeah, actually, you really have to do it this way, and I can't because one of these is missing a tab. But anyway, it's supposed to be like, well, I guess you can't do it like that. Oh, actually you can. You actually have to get this in here and then put it down. So again, it's a lot of like trial and error. The instructions only have like 3 small pictures of like, oh, here's what you can do with this. It's like, yeah, thanks. And I had to really squint to figure out what they were trying to show me, but these are just some of the configurations you can do. And actually, without that tab, I can still do this because of how it slots in that way. But anyway, he doesn't really connect to it like this. You just sort of put him there, and hey, it looks kind of neat. But probably the real functionality you can get out of this thing is there's this whole armature assembly. And this also breaks down itself. It's actually just this little base and then 2 struts and 3 joints. And these joints are interesting because they have ratchets in them. But they're actually really hard to move, so you kind of have to get the leverage from having these struts in them. Because listen here. Yeah. So some of these are tighter than the other ones. Like that one's pretty easy. This one, I believe, is a bit tighter. Oh yeah. But anyway, what you're going to do is you can just put these together, and now you've got an armature for displaying Rodimus like jumping or something. So yeah, now he's off camera. But you can see this thing, it holds him pretty well. You probably don't want to like mess with putting it in and out too much, just because again the spoiler is painted. It's orange plastic painted yellow, so just kind of watch the paint scraping around here. And you know, it'll kind of just leave them up there for a couple of poses, and you can even like tilt them around a little bit. It's not super great, but you know, it's there. It's kind of neat functionality, and these things are being used with, I believe they just started using them with the ES Gokin transformers. I'm not sure if they're also in some of the other ones, the non-transformer ones. Because I know some of the non-transformers ones use that awful stand their EM Gokin figures used. But what you can do with all this stuff, if you want, is arrange it into its own kind of big, all-encompassing display stand. And the way you can do that is you actually use the struts, because they have multiple ways of being plugged together. Just put the struts right here, and then use this pair of struts, and they will actually, because again they have more and more tabs for slotting in. You have this whole like big backdrop here, and then you can also put the hand holder in the back here and just stick Rodimus in there like that. The only problem is, again, this is kind of a generic stand set that they're including with some of their toys, is there's no real place to put the Matrix or even his gun, other than, you know, you rest it in the hands that are back here, which is okay. And this stuff, it's neat. I kind of wish I had more of them to do stuff with, and I wish that they were just a little bit sturdier, or at least they came apart a bit easier. Because, yeah, some of the tabs are easy to break if you mishandle them. But anyway, that is the whole stand system. So in the end, the ES Gokin Rodimus Prime is it's a neat character item. It's got pretty nice feel to it. The paint finish and all that, it's good. It's very attractive, and it looks a lot like the character. It's not perfect. I definitely don't like the weird flexible skirts. I feel like if I do that too much, it's going to tear off. But, you know, that's just kind of how they wanted to do this. I would have preferred this would be like just a hinged plate that moved out of the way, but I think what they were doing there is trying to emulate the kind of squishy nature of 80s cartoon designs. And also he's got like a little bit of imperfections like all around him. There's little nubs here on his spoiler, his exhaust pipes on his arms, where they snipped it off with a sprue and didn't actually clean it up. They just colored over it. But yeah, it's kind of, that's not great, but I can overlook that, because it's still a nice, straightforward die-cast figure. And he costs 4,800 yen, which is about $40 with today's exchange rate. So yeah, he's a bit higher end as far as price goes, but you know, he's an import Japanese figure, and that's just how things are over there. Pretty good if you're a Rodimus Prime collector, as I am. And although I will say that this makes me wish they would do an EX Gokin figure, because I saw Josh's reviews of the EX Gokin, Optimus Prime, and Grimlock, and those look really great, and they're super cartoon accurate, and you know, this is still pretty cool, but it leaves me wanting for something just a bit more substantial, and I hope they get around to that at some point. Anyway, this has been Andrew for CollectionDX.com. Thank you for watching.